Okay, folks, so I want to share a little bit more information on the distant early warning system, the DEW system. And just in case there are people that still aren't familiar with it, it was this very large radar array system and radio frequency beaming system um, that was placed very near the center of the Earth, okay, um, to influence the upper atmosphere and the ionosphere. And they say that it was for, national defense and national security. It was an early warning system to detect missiles and stuff coming over from Russia, right? Well, um, they have their own system on the other side too, as well. It creates an entire circle right over the center of our planet. Okay. And I think that it has additional reasons for coming into existence, but that's a whole nother video. For now, I just want to kind of share the basic information for people who still aren't aware of it. And it's interesting that this particular publication here, this operations handbook by Captain Pamela G. Rooney, I cannot find a published date on this. I've searched and I've even looked through the Dewline Museum's source material, their resource library for the Dewline Museum, and I can't find a publishing date. They don't offer up a publishing date. Here's listed here, but it doesn't list a publishing date. A lot of these other ones will list a publishing date of when it was published. But that one there, this handbook does not have a publishing date. And I even tried to get the AI to help me out. I asked the AI, what year was the Distant Early Warning System Operations Handbook published? And the co-pilot says, I apologize, but I don't have access to specific publication dates for the Distant Early Warning DEW System Operations Handbook. So I don't know, just among many other things, I just find that curious that I cannot find a publication date of when this was actually officially published. Now there's a scan by Jack Lupick on April 12th, 2015 date, but this was published long before 2015, okay? When this operations handbook was written. And I'm just going to scan through and read a few paragraphs here and there and kind of get to the main point of this video and sharing this type of information because I think that um, it's been a tool not just for as an early warning system for national security, but I do believe that it's also been a tool that has been aiding and abetting the progress concerning the whole weather as a force multiplier, owning the weather in 2025. And I do think that a lot of the systems and things that are in place right now with this distant early warning system, I mean, it didn't go defunct. It just became the North Warning System, the NWS, which curiously also stands for National Weather System, National Weather Service, excuse me. So I think that's curious. And this was published in the National Defense. I got a published date on this one. 7/27/2018, the United States, Canada studying options to replace Arctic early warning radars. Okay, they need to upgrade the systems because times are changing and we have like hypersonic crafts and things at play out there on the warfield, right? And it's interesting that Raytheon Canada, based in Ottawa, won a contract to operate and maintain the systems because currently they're maintained by this Nazituk, a joint venture between Canadian companies Atco Structures and Logistics and Pan Arctic Inuit Logistics Corporation. Previously held the contract. And it says here that the initial 5-year contract secures services until March 31st, 2019, but it could be extended until 2024, according to a PSPC spokesperson. So this whole radar system here and all of these, radio beamers and all of this trans receivers and all of this stuff going on up there has been up there for a good long time. And they've been updating it and keeping it updated. And it's the same type of equipment that is still used for the North Warning System. The North Warning System, NWS, is an operational defense system that was designed to promote North American air sovereignty and continental security. It detects aircraft and cruise missiles flying within its radar coverage and spans over 5,000 kilometers across Canada's north. And, these look a lot like weather radar stations, a lot like the little Doppler radar stations that we see just peppered all over the United States. And it's the same type of equipment that is used by NOAA's observational systems. And it's curious, too, that not only do they use just the ground-based systems that they have in place, these 47 radar sites that operate unattended, powered by diesel electronic generators in the cold like that, right? And they're connected by satellite ground terminals. Okay, all of this stuff needs to be maintained in order for our national security, right? It's for our national security. It's not so that they can, own and control the weather, right? It's not because they need, space weather support for communications or anything like that, right? And I just, it's very curious, with NOAA and the National Weather Service, NOAA observational systems, they talk about the upper air soundings, okay? Twice every day from nearly 100 locations in the United States, the National Weather Service launches weather balloons carrying instrument packages called radio sounds sensors measure upper air conditions such as atmospheric pressure, temperature, and humidity, wind speed, and direction. The data are important for aviation safety and to identify the potential for severe weather and provide valuable data for numerical weather models. So you launch every day from nearly 100 locations in the US, these little satellite balloons, these little weather balloons, right? But what about this? What about the satellite systems that you talk about that are hurling and whirling around us? You know, there are a lot of things that just don't add up when it comes to some of these systems. And I just think that it's very curious that they've put together this whole do line and everything. And I want to cover a little bit more of this too, because there's some interesting information. Um, yeah. Let me see if I can find some of this other information here. Yeah. As we have said, the DEW Line's original mission has been vastly enlarged and its radar and communications equipment enormously upgraded. You mean vastly enlarged by the radar sites getting bigger, but it's also serving additional purposes, right? It's also part of a system that is being used to forecast weather. Well, I would debate that. Okay. I would debate that. I would definitely say that this early warning system and this whole array of antennas and radar dishes and all the stuff and equipment that has been strewn across our continent here is serving another purpose as well. It is it is helping to support their control of the weather, because one of the biggest issues that is stated repeatedly in multiple publications concerning the dew line, okay, and publication after publication. Oh, that's kind of interesting too, a hearing system patent. But anyway, I'm not going to blur. In all of these publications, one of the biggest hurdles and one of the biggest challenges that they have in being able to detect things in the upper atmosphere and to do their research projects and research and development into better systems like aircraft systems and so and such, right, has been the weather, because they cannot predict the weather. They cannot control the weather. That has always been an issue with these so-called defensive systems. So the fact that this publication here highlights that according to a Spacecast 2020 study, then again, this is from Owning the Weather 2025, space weather support for communications, the major factors limiting our ability to observe and accurately forecast space weather are: one, current ionospheric sensing capability, density and frequency of ionospheric observations, sophistication and accuracy of ionospheric models, and current scientific understanding of the physics of ionosphere, thermosphere, magnetosphere coupling mechanisms. Okay, the report recommends that improvements be realized in our ability to measure the ionosphere vertically and spatially. To this end, an architecture for ionospheric mapping was proposed. Such a system, here's the key words, such a system would consist of ionospheric sounders and other sensing devices installed on DoD and commercial satellite constellations. You don't say. Ionospheric sounders, huh? Well, what does the Northern Watch Command do? See if I could, or NOAA. What does NOAA do? Their upper air soundings that twice every day from nearly 100 locations in the United States, the National Weather Service launches weather balloons carrying instrument packages called radio sounders. And it's already been proven that this type of energy that was flowing out of this dew line was actually influencing the upper atmosphere and the weather patterns. And it was creating this whole need for space weather observations, right? Just allow them further control in order, to gain further control of those weather patterns. Because if you can control the weather, then you can control the world. And if you can control the weather, you can use it as a weapon as well. But anyway, I want to go in a little bit more here. It talks about tomorrow's DEW system. One of the highest priority strategic defense systems now being developed is the so-called North Warning System, NWS. Okay, that's this here. I mentioned a little bit about the North Warning System, which is simply a thorough modernization of the DEW line. The mission of tactical warning and attack assessment has not changed. Let me repeat this one, which is simply a thorough modernization of the DEW line. So essentially, the North Warning System, which is active from 1988 to present. Okay, it's active, run jointly by United States and Canada, and it's maintained by this Nazituk, and Raytheon held the contract. I'm sure Raytheon is still involved in a lot of this kind of stuff. I'm pretty certain of it. So you have the North Warning System, which is just a modernization of the dew line. So the dew line is not defunct. The dew line still exists. Okay. This still exists. This did not just go defunct. They didn't just remove all of this equipment and just abandon the project. Okay. It's all still in play and it's all being exploited, I believe, by NOAA and by those that have been attempting to own and control the weather by 2025. Okay. For our safety, right? The mission of tactical warning and attack assessment has not changed. The radar equipment will. The new radar systems will provide greatly improved low altitude coverage and can be operated and maintained at substantially reduced cost. The NWS will be deployed in the Alaskan and Canadian North Slopes and down the Labrador coast. The improved and optimally placed radars will provide target data within their surveillance envelope to the NORAD regional operations control centers and will provide a radar surveillance and command and control capability along the Arctic Circle. In other words, creating a barrier all the way around what they call the Arctic Circle. Okay. North warning system. I'm telling y'all, it's kind of interesting that the Dew Lines patch has this on there. Let me show you that graphic real quick here. This is the one of the patches for the Dew Line. And when you translate this, you come up with faith is the contention of the wise. That's interesting that they would use that for one of their patches for the Dew Line, right? It talks about how the NWS will consist of approximately 40 unattended short-range radars, 14 minimally manned long-range radars. Current Dew Line radars will be phased out in a sequence that minimizes degradation to the early warning capability. So in other words, they're not going to stop what they're doing to put up a new one. It's been continual. Okay. It's just like this little transition and flow into the newer technologies and mainly the newer like sensing technologies, just sense hypersonics and much faster moving crafts and artillery, right? Now, this talks about the dormitories, warehouses, hangars, ROADs. It talks about airfields, and taxiways, and all the vehicles and everything used. I don't want to go into too much more of that, but I'm I wanted to find. It does say something about the page 14 and 15 are missing. Let me scroll up here because it says here, note pages 14 and 15 are missing. So I find that curious because when you scroll down to the very last pages that are available, it's like these diagrams showing the layout and everything. And yeah, you can tell this is an older publication just because of the way it was copied and everything too. It's kind of interesting when you look at the it talks about, hang on, some of the threats. Um, Let me see. Polar bears are occasionally encountered at several sites, and just remember they are very dangerous animals. If one comes into the site and is menacing, the station chief will decide the best course of action. Be very cautious of any wild animals since rabies among these animals is prevalent. Do not try to be a hero and venture outside. I mean, you totally put in all of this stuff. I got to wonder how many animals and how much of our ecosystem and our environment was completely destroyed, like forever, because of the system that's still in place that supposedly is needed for our national security. It's not needed to create, you know, space weather and control weather systems or anything like that. No, that's just ridiculous, right? And it talks about the greatest potential man-made hazard on the line is fire. On almost all the sites, the personnel are their own fire departments. So know the location and use of fire protection systems. Look for and report any potential hazard and do not smoke in bed at any time with like 5 exclamation points. They talk about items to bring to the Dew Line. Talks about clothing, a miscellaneous, a small cassette player and tapes, camera and film a must, alarm clock, toilet kit, sewing kit, nail clippers, 6 months supply of medication if required, contact lens solution. That dates this publication right there pretty well. A small cassette player and tapes, right? It does talk about Arctic area facts and historical sketches. The Dew Line extends east and west across the high Arctic at roughly the 69th parallel. 69. Yeah, no, that was childish. On the average, it is about 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle and 1,200 miles from the North Pole. So it's situated in a place where if you have the inhabitants of this planet on the other side and they've got the same thing, then you've got this big giant circle going around guarding and protecting the very middle of the planet, right? I just, it's very curious to me when they put out publications like this and the information is available for everybody, but people still don't want to believe that they're doing these things like this, right? This was kind of curious here. Shows The first practical means of detecting airplanes at a distance was by listening for their noise with the aid of horns. Larger horns increased the range of detection, and one horn pair funneled the sound into the ears of the azimuth operator. The azimuth operator. The other pair was used by the elevation operator. Shows these very large listening ears, right? Listening devices. Supposedly, that's what they say, because they couldn't have, used these as speakers to project sound either, right? I just, there's some other interesting stories in some of these other publications I'll go into in another video, the Dew Line story. This is published by the Western Electric Company, and this one does have a published date. This was 1957, I believe, was the original published date. So I'll go into some more of that too. But I find it very curious that when we're talking about these Arctic regions, and we know that they have all of these research bases and everything all, set up where they're researching all kinds of, you know, scientific things. And in the Arctic and in the colder areas, they would most definitely want to research ways to keep things from freezing, like equipment and fluids used to operate equipment, and like maybe even human beings. And I know, stick with me, okay, just a little bit longer. I'm going to dangle out on the conspiracy tree branches a little bit farther than normal, and what a lot of other people will probably see as just quite silliness. But it's my opinion. It's just one of my silly little theories that I have. Um, when it comes to other things that we have available to us in that culture, right? What do we have um, with Mountain Dew, right? If we look at the list of ingredients in Mountain Dew, okay, these are the different Mountain Dew flavors, which I find are very curious. And the term Mountain Dew, they say that it was created by some hillbillies or something from the South. And the term Mountain Dew was also a term given to moonshine, right? For homemade high proof distilled spirits, also known as Mountain Dew or moonshine, right? But as with most things that's written down in history, they can invent stories as well. And I myself personally, I think that this formula that they have, let's look at the ingredients really quick. I want to show you the ingredients. Here's the list of ingredients, okay? And it lists off the concentrated orange juice, citric acid, sodium benzoate, caffeine, sodium nitrate, and acid, gamma arabic. And there's one here that I find very curious, and it's probably the most curious ingredient that is in Mountain Dew, and it's pronounced ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid. Okay, ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid, and it's very curious. Ethylene, ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid is also used as a medication in the management and treatment of heavy metal toxicity. It is in the chelating class of drugs. So Mountain Dew has an ingredient that is used for managing lead toxicity. Okay. So it has some kind of a biological type of a application for treating, you know. And I just it's interesting to look at antifreeze. Okay, now what would be a very, very valuable asset to people that are having to work in this really harsh environment of the Arctic, right? Or maybe on the ice wall, the Antarctic, right? One of the most beneficial things that they could have would be an antifreeze of some kind, right? And it's curious that it works either way, really, because it can increase the boiling point and it can increase its freezing point. Like it can withstand colder temperatures, like Arctic temperatures. And if we look at biological antifreezes, antifreeze proteins refer to chemical compounds produced by certain animals and plants and other organisms that prevent the formation of ice. In this way, these compounds allow their host organism to operate at temperatures well below the freezing point of water. So what if, and again, I'm dangling out there on the conspiracy tree branches, what if Mountain Dew really was a product of some research and development in additives and things that human beings even could drink to make themselves more tolerant in these Arctic regions while they were working on some of this equipment? What if it was developed as an antifreeze for human beings? I mean, you can't ignore the main ingredient and what they list as the main ingredient. One of the main ingredients, ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid, and it does have these chelating capabilities. It is, somewhat tolerable to the human system, and coincidentally, it's also involved in, for ethylene glycol. Some of these ingredients are used for vapes that people use in their vapes for smoking, e-liquid. propylene glycol. It's commonly used as a main ingredient in the e-liquid used in electronic cigarettes. So could this even, could this whole vaping thing that has come about, could these have been used as devices by these people working in these harsh environments to protect their lungs and to protect their systems and keep them from freezing to death, right? I mean, that's where my mind goes. And it's curious that when you look at pure ethylene glycol freezes at about minus 12 degrees Celsius, 10.4 degrees Fahrenheit. But when mixed with water, the mixture freezes at a lower temperature. For example, a mixture of 60% ethylene glycol and 40% water freezes at minus 45 degrees Celsius or minus 49 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. So if you're somebody that's working in the Arctic and you're doing research and development on ways to build tolerance levels to this harsh environment in order to work there and get this job done and stuff, you would try to come up with some kind of an antifreeze for human beings. And it's interesting when you look at the list of the names, some of the names, I mean, come on. Let's look at some of the names really quick before I end this up. Livewire, Mountain Dew Livewire, Mountain Dew Voltage, Mountain Dew Spark. I mean, come on. Berry Monster, Sweet Lightning, okay, Maui Burst, Atomic Blue, Southern Shock, Thrashed Apple, I mean, Purple Thunder, Infinite Swirl. I mean, look at some of the names of some of these Mountain Dew flavors and stuff. It's almost like they're telling us in so many words that this has some kind of association. I can't tell you exactly what, but I would dare say that this whole thing with Mountain Dew and the development of Mountain Dew isn't the product of two, hillbilly dudes from the South that developed a good, mixing soda for alcohol. Okay. I'm just saying, I think it was originally formed as an antifreeze for human beings that were working on the Dew line, Mountain Dew. They were putting up all this construction and everything through these hills and through the mountains, and they developed this concoction that allowed the construction workers and the research and development folks and all the scientists to be able to withstand that harsh, Arctic environment by drinking this antifreeze. I'm just saying that's where my brain goes when it comes to some of this stuff. I just
And one more curious thing about ethylene glycol is that it is an odorless, colorless, flammable, viscous liquid, and it has a sweet taste, but it is toxic in high concentration, so it has a sweet taste. So, like, I can imagine like these dudes sitting around in the Arctic, like drinking this stuff as antifreeze and like saying, "Oh man, this stuff is sweet. We could sell this as a beverage." Anyway,
I just just so that y'all know, the Dew line did not disappear. It still exists. It's just under the name of the North Warning System, and it has everything to do with NOAA and space weather systems and space weather predictions. And as far as I'm concerned, it has everything to do with owning the weather in 2025. But it was there for our air defense, for our national security, right? Yeah. Anyway, I'll read a little bit more into some of these. There's another one that talks about the defending the northern line. That's interesting. A couple of inserts from I'll share in another video, but I'll end it with this peek here real quick at this patent for a hearing system. Sound is induced in the head of a person by radiating the head with microwaves in the range of 100 megahertz to 10,000 megahertz that are modulated